moving to a different country for studies or work can be a huge shift, both physically and emotionally. And it requires a period of settling in with a lot of adjustments, getting used to the new place and a new way of life. I've noticed that many people in India think that adjusting to life in the West is only about doing your household work yourself. For example, cooking, cleaning, laundry, dishwashing. But adapting to life in a new country is much deeper than that. It requires us to adjust to life away from our families and familiar ecosystem, the cultural and social changes to our daily life, food, weather, finances, and so much more. Hello friends, and welcome back to The Happy Host. Today I will share with you some of my own culture shocks and adjustment experiences when I first moved to New York in US and later to Europe. And I will also share with you how my adjustments have been similar or different in these two regions. But before we begin, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel. And if you are already supporting me, thank you so much. Please continue to show your support. I traveled outside India for the first time within a few years of my first job, when I was placed in New York in the US. Now, I have been raised in a small town in India, so the New York experience was totally overwhelming for me. And I started looking at the world through a completely different lens. So after 3 years in New York, I'm now based in Europe for the last 7 years. I live in Sweden's capital, Stockholm, and travel across Europe for work and leisure. So what have been the cultural shifts that I have witnessed in these two regions that I slowly learned to adapt? So I'll first start with the similar shifts that I noticed when I moved out of India, the changes that were similar between America and Europe, and ones that are very different between US and Europe. Let me start with the currency conversion. This is a very common trait. So any of us who move abroad for the first time, we tend to convert all our expenses into Indian rupees. And that is why we get shocked when a house rent abroad costs, say, 1.5 lakh rupees per month, when in India you may be paying just about 40,000 rupees per month. Or a gobi costs rupees 400 here, when it's just 60 rupees there in India. So I slowly learned that this is not a fair comparison and we must stop it as soon as possible, because we are earning in dollars or euros. So our expenses should also be compared against that income rather than converting the expenses to rupees while we are earning in a different currency. So the currency conversion should be stopped as soon as possible. Doing your own household work. Of course, this comes as a big shift when you move out of India. In fact, we are privileged in India and a few countries in Asia where we get domestic help to help us out with our household work like cooking, cleaning, ironing our clothes, washing our cars, and so on. But everywhere else in the world, doing your own household work is just a regular way of life. So when I first moved to US, doing my own work actually came as a lot of additional pressure. But I slowly started learning how to use the right tools, say a vacuum cleaner, which I had never used in India, a dishwasher, which I had never used before. So once I started learning how to use these appliances, life was not that bad after all. In fact, we don't even need to clean our homes daily. Even now that I'm in Europe, I don't have to clean my home daily because it doesn't get that dirty. There's not so much dust as against our practice in India where we have to get our houses cleaned every day. So now doing my own household work here in Europe has become more of my routine and it doesn't bother me so much. Next comes the traffic rules. Now, traffic rules in US and Europe is exactly opposite to that of India. In India, we stay on the left, and in US and Europe, we stay on the right. So initially when I went to US, I used to be very confused. And every time I had to wait for a bus, I would invariably be standing on the wrong side of the road when I was waiting for a bus in a particular direction. I don't drive, but same goes for the people who drive. So in India, you have a right-hand steering wheel and you drive on the left. In US, Europe, it's exactly the opposite. Your steering wheel is on the left and you drive on the right. So I think it takes a bit of practice and some amount of conscious learning. And we slowly adjust to these changes. Now, let us talk about some of these cultural shifts, which are very different in US and Europe. Let's consider language, for example. As we know, US is an English-speaking country, and we in India are mostly comfortable with English. So it should come as no surprise that when we travel to the US, language should not be a problem at all. But honestly, when I first went to US, I had serious problem understanding people's accents, because in US, people have so many different regional accents. And I'm talking about a time when I used to watch English movies with English subtitles. So that was my condition. I was not good with understanding the accents. But it took me a while to speak to people more and more, listening to them on a regular basis. And with time, I think I got more comfortable so I could understand what they were saying. Compare that with Europe. Again, I'm talking about the northern and the western Europe, where most people speak English. Though each country has its own local language, but people at offices and at stores and trains, people mostly speak English. So that oral communication has not been a problem, but the written text everywhere, whether in stations and supermarkets or on the road signals, everywhere the language is the local language of that country. So initially I started learning the local language, that is Swedish. But slowly I found that I was picking up the more common terms which I was using in my daily life. So if you're in Europe, learning the local language is a good option. But even otherwise, I think we slowly learn the commonly used local language terms in our daily lives. Another major shift between US and Europe is the units of measurement. Europe uses the same units of measurement that are used in India, that is the metric system. So weights are in grams and kilograms, distance is in meters, kilometers, liquid volumes are in liters, milliliters, temperature, degree centigrade, speed, kilometers per hour. So all this is fine. So on the measurement front, I didn't have to make any adjustments when I came to Europe. But in US, all these measurements are completely using different units. So for weights, it's pounds. So for liquids, it's ounce. For temperature, it's degree Fahrenheit. For length, it's miles. For speed, it's miles per hour. And it never quite registered to me what is the actual measure. So I would constantly convert it to the Indian system of the metric measurements to understand what is the actual measure. Now, let's talk about the socio-cultural shifts. Americans are known to be more social than the Europeans, especially those in the northern parts of Europe. So in US, you can expect casual greetings and small talks in the trains or elevators or stores. But in Europe, people are more reserved and they like to keep to themselves. So I found it easier to make friends in US than in Europe, though I have stayed in Europe for much longer than in US, but I had made more friends in US than in Europe. Also, I found that speaking aloud in my normal volume was fine in US. So I would talk in my normal volume with friends or on phone. But in Europe, talking loudly is not acceptable. So I have learned to speak at a much lower volume than my normal tone, especially when I'm in public places, because people tend to stare at you because everything is so quiet everywhere. So people stare at me if I'm speaking loudly on the phone or with friends. So that is something which I had to change after a lot of effort. Another major shift that we notice between US and Europe when we move out of India is the size of the homes, the indoor spaces. So before I went to US, in India, I was living in a modest 6-storied building with a 2 BHK flat. And when I landed in New York and found an apartment on a 25-storied building, I was ecstatic. It was a beautiful, spacious flat. It had a good-sized kitchen, balcony, and a fantastic view. Of course, I did not live in the pricey Manhattan neighborhood. I was living in Queens, where the rent was more reasonable. And all the flats that I had seen in that area were quite spacious. So that was the normal sizes of homes there. But when I came to Europe, I noticed that the home sizes were much smaller. And Kitchens are generally very, very compact, and the spaces have been optimized to the extent possible. My home in Sweden, where I live currently, is in a beautiful neighborhood on the Baltic beach amidst nature, but the space is very, very limited. And as you can see in the background, this is my living room. So even after just putting in only the basic furnitures, there is very little space to walk around. So I used to feel very suffocated initially when I came in. But then slowly I have got adjusted to this smaller space, and even I now optimize with my items which I purchase or store. I try to optimize my space. And it's not just with the home spaces. The same goes for your restaurants, your hotels, or any enclosed spaces in Europe. You will find them generally much smaller than what you have seen in India or America. Another major shift that you will notice when you're moving out of India into US or Europe is about the weather. Now, US is a very large country, and weather varies across the regions from moderate to hot in summer to cold and very cold in winter across the various parts of the US. Whereas if you're in Europe, again, the northern parts of Europe, they are mostly cold for most parts of the year, and winters can be very cold and dark. So you will find investing in a lot of winter wear, heavy woolens, boots, if you are in the colder parts of either US or Europe. And also during winter, you will have additional expenses in the form of your heating bills, which we do not have in India. So this is again something which could be a shift that you can see when you're moving to US or Europe. When we think about Indian festivals, well, we Indians celebrate our festivals wherever in the world we are. So if you look at US, Holi, Diwali, Dussehra, all these festivals are celebrated widely by the Indian communities in US, and they come in large numbers. All these festivals are also celebrated in Europe, but obviously the scale and numbers are much smaller because the Indian community size themselves in each European country is much smaller than the US. Also, we must remember that the Indian festivals are public holidays in India. But in US or Europe, these are not public holidays. So most often we end up celebrating these festivals over the weekends. So this might come as a change for you, and this is something which we had to adjust to because we know that our festivals are being celebrated in India at that time, but we still have to wait for a few days till the weekend comes for us to celebrate in US or Europe. Eating out. Now, eating out is something which we all enjoy in India. Whether it's catching up with friends or celebrating a success with our family, a good meal in a restaurant is something we all enjoy. So if you're looking for a similar experience in US, well, you have a huge choice of Indian and continental restaurants in all small and large cities of US. Portion sizes served are very large, so you need to consider that when you're ordering your food. And tipping is still an expectation in restaurants in US. So roughly a 15 to 20% tip is the considered norm there, which is quite high than in India. Now, in Europe, you will find a lot of restaurants, but the Indian restaurants will be much fewer in number, and they are mostly present in the larger cities of Europe. One big difference is that the portion sizes served in Europe are much smaller than both India and US, so that is something which you need to keep in mind. And tipping is not a requirement there because it is anyways added to your service charges in the food bill itself. So tipping in Europe is not an expectation, but your choice. But remember that in both these places, in both US and Europe, the Indian food that you get will be much milder than what you get in India because the spice levels are toned down to customize to the local taste. So it will not be as spicy as you can expect in India. The same dish will be much milder and probably slightly sweeter when you order it in US or Europe. So these were some of the cultural shifts that I experienced and adapted to while living in US and Europe. Do join in the conversation and share your experiences about more such lifestyle changes which you experienced while living abroad and how you adjusted to them. If you like my content, please subscribe to my channel and like, share and comment on this video. Hope to meet you again next week with another topic. Till then, bye-bye.